The radio crackled to life at exactly 2:17 a.m., cutting through the quiet night like a knife. Officer David Rivera had been patrolling the east side of the city for 3 hours, dealing with the usual late-night calls, drunk drivers, noise complaints, and the occasional domestic dispute. But this call sounded different. Unit 247, we have a possible break-in at Maple Street Apartments, Building C. Multiple residents reporting suspicious activity on the 3rd floor. The dispatcher's voice echoed. Through his patrol car, David grabbed his radio and responded quickly. Unit 247 responding. ETA 3 minutes. He flipped on his lights but kept the siren off. Night calls in this neighborhood required a careful approach. Maple Street Apartments wasn't exactly the safest part of town. Drug deals, gang activity, and petty crime were common here. David had been working this beat for 15 years and he knew every alley, every building, and most of the troublemakers by name. As he pulled into the apartment complex parking lot, David noticed how eerily quiet everything seemed. Most of the windows were dark, which was normal for a Tuesday night. He stepped out of his car and immediately felt the tension in the air. Something was definitely happening here. David walked toward Building C, his hand instinctively resting on his service weapon. The old concrete building looked like dozens of others in the area, worn down, poorly lit, with graffiti covering most of the lower walls. He climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, his boots echoing in the stairwell. When he reached the 3rd floor hallway, David stopped dead in his tracks. About 50 feet away, near apartment 3B, a woman was crouched by a door. She was dressed in dark jeans and a black hoodie, and she appeared to be working on the door lock with some kind of tools. Her movements were quick and precise, like someone who knew exactly what they were doing. David's heart rate picked up. This was clearly the break-in the residents had called about. He quietly moved closer, staying in the shadows to get a better look. The woman was completely focused on the lock, unaware that she was being watched. "Police, step away from the door with your hands visible," David shouted, his voice echoing through the hallway. The woman spun around, clearly startled. In the dim hallway light, David could see she was probably in her early 30s with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. What concerned him most was how she immediately tensed up, like she was ready to run or fight. "I said step away from the door. Put your hands where I can see them," David repeated, moving closer with his flashlight beam focused on her. Instead of complying, the woman stood up quickly and started reaching inside her jacket. Every alarm bell in David's head went off at once. In 15 years of police work, he had learned that when someone reaches for something during a confrontation, it's usually not good news. "Don't move. Keep your hands visible," David commanded. But the woman continued reaching into her jacket pocket. The next few seconds felt like they happened in slow motion. David saw the woman's hand disappear completely into her jacket, and his training kicked in automatically. In neighborhoods like this, officers got shot for hesitating. He had seen too many good cops get hurt because they waited too long to act. Without thinking, David pulled out his baton and moved forward quickly. The woman was still fumbling with something in her jacket when David struck her across the face with the baton. The impact was solid and immediate. The woman stumbled backward and hit the wall hard before sliding down to the floor. David immediately felt a mix of relief and regret. Relief that the threat was neutralized, but regret that he had to use force against a woman. However, in situations like this, gender didn't matter. A threat was a threat. "Stay down. Don't move," David ordered, approaching cautiously with his flashlight pointed at her. The woman was conscious but clearly dazed. Blood was streaming from her nose and she was holding her face with one hand. David could see she was in significant pain, but he needed to secure the scene first. As David got closer, he noticed something that made his stomach drop. Several items had fallen from the woman's jacket when she hit the ground. In the beam of his flashlight, he could clearly see a wallet, some papers, and most importantly, a shiny metal badge. David's hands began to shake as he picked up the badge. It wasn't a toy or a fake. It was a genuine Federal Bureau of Investigation badge, and it belonged to Special Agent Lisa Martinez. The identification card next to it showed the same woman who was now sitting on the floor, bleeding from the nose he had just broken. "Oh my God," David whispered, the full weight of what had just happened hitting him like a truck. Agent Martinez was slowly trying to get back to her feet, still holding her nose. When she saw David staring at her credentials, she managed to speak through the pain. "I'm FBI," she said, her voice muffled and strained. "I was conducting an investigation." David felt like the ground was spinning beneath his feet. In 15 years of police work, he had never made a mistake this big. He had just assaulted a federal agent with his baton. His career, his pension, his entire future flashed before his eyes in an instant. I didn't know," David stammered, kneeling down to help Agent Martinez. "You didn't identify yourself. I thought you were breaking in." Agent Martinez slowly stood up, leaning against the wall for support. Despite her injury, David could see the intelligence and authority in her eyes. This was clearly someone who was used to dangerous situations. "I couldn't identify myself," she explained, wincing as she touched her nose. "I'm working undercover. The suspect in apartment 3B is involved in illegal weapons trafficking. I've been tracking him for months." David felt even worse. Not only had he assaulted a federal agent, but he had potentially ruined an important investigation. The sound of their confrontation had definitely been loud enough for anyone in the nearby apartments to hear. "We need to call this in," David said, reaching for his radio with trembling hands. "Wait," Agent Martinez said quickly, grabbing his arm. "If we call this in right now, my entire operation is blown. The suspect will know something is wrong and he'll disappear before we can arrest him." David looked at the agent's bloody face and felt the weight of an impossible decision. He was required to report any use of force immediately, especially when it involved a federal agent. But Agent Martinez was right. Calling it in right now would definitely compromise her investigation. The hallway was silent, except for the sound of their breathing and the distant hum of traffic outside. David realized that the next few minutes would determine not just his career, but potentially the success or failure of a major federal investigation. As he stood there, looking at Agent Martinez's injured face and thinking about the weapons dealer, who might be listening from behind the door of apartment 3B, David knew that this night would change everything for both of them. David's hands were still shaking as he stared at Agent Martinez's FBI badge. The metal felt cold and real in his palm, and the weight of what he had done was crushing down on him like a building collapsing. He had hit a federal agent, not just any federal agent, but someone who was in the middle of an important investigation. Agent Martinez was leaning against the wall, using her sleeve to wipe the blood from her nose. Even in the dim hallway light, David could see that her face was already starting to swell. The guilt hit him harder than any punch to the gut. "Agent Martinez, I am so sorry," David said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I had no idea. You have to understand, in this neighborhood, when someone doesn't identify themselves and reaches into their jacket—" "I know," Agent Martinez interrupted, her voice nasally from the injury. "I understand why you did it. In your position, I probably would have done the same thing." She paused to wipe more blood. "But that doesn't change the fact that my operation is now completely compromised." David felt even worse hearing her say that. Not only had he hurt an innocent person, but he had also destroyed months of work. He couldn't imagine how frustrating that must be for her. "What kind of operation?" David asked, though he wasn't sure if he really wanted to know the answer. Agent Martinez looked at the door of apartment 3B, then back at David. "The man in that apartment is named Victor Chen. He's been selling military-grade weapons to gang members and criminals across the city. We've been tracking him for 8 months, gathering evidence, documenting his contacts. Tonight was supposed to be the night we finally got the proof we needed to arrest him." David's heart sank even further. Military-grade weapons meant serious danger to everyone in the city, including his fellow officers. If this Victor guy was selling that kind of equipment to criminals, people could die because of the weapons he provided. "We need to get you medical attention," David said, reaching for his radio again. "And I need to call my supervisor." "Wait," Agent Martinez said urgently, grabbing his wrist. "Before you make that call, you need to understand something. The moment you radio this in, Victor will know something went wrong. He's probably listening to police scanners right now. If he hears about a federal agent being involved in an incident at this address, he'll be gone within minutes. David paused with his radio halfway to his mouth. She was right, of course. Most criminals in this area monitored police communications. It was how they stayed one step ahead of law enforcement. But I have to report this, David said. Use of force has to be documented immediately, especially when it involves. He gestured at her badge. I know the protocols, Agent Martinez said, but if you call it in right now, 8 months of work disappears. Victor disappears, and those weapons stay on the street. They stood there in the hallway, both of them trying to figure out what to do next. David could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Every second they waited made the situation more complicated. Suddenly, they heard movement from inside apartment 3B. Footsteps, followed by what sounded like drawers being opened and closed quickly. Agent Martinez and David looked at each other with the same realization. Victor had definitely heard their confrontation. He's packing, Agent Martinez whispered. He's getting ready to run. David felt a new wave of panic. Not only had he ruined the investigation, but now the suspect was going to escape because of the noise they had made. This night was turning into the worst disaster of his career. What do we do? David asked. Before Agent Martinez could answer, David's radio crackled to life. Unit 247, what's your status? We've had more calls about disturbances at your location. David and Agent Martinez stared at each other. The dispatcher was asking for an update, which meant David had to respond. But whatever he said next would determine whether Victor Chen escaped, or if there was still a chance to salvage the operation. I have to answer, David said. Agent Martinez nodded, understanding the impossible position he was in. Just don't mention me yet. Give us a few more minutes to figure this out. David pressed the button on his radio. Unit 247 to dispatch. Situation is under control. False alarm on the break-in. Still investigating some noise complaints. We'll update in 10 minutes. Copy that, 247. The hallway fell silent again except for the continued sounds of movement from apartment 3B. David could tell that Victor was definitely preparing to leave. They were running out of time. Is there any way to save this? David asked. Any way to still get your guy? Agent Martinez was quiet for a moment, thinking. Blood was still trickling from her nose, and David could see that her eye was starting to turn purple. The guilt was eating him alive. Maybe, she finally said. But it would require you to trust me, and it would mean bending some rules. What kind of rules? The kind that could end both our careers if we get caught. David looked at her swollen face, then at the door where Victor was probably loading weapons into bags right now. He thought about his 15 years on the force, his pension, his reputation. Then he thought about military-grade weapons being sold to gang members who would use them to hurt innocent people. Tell me what you need, David said. Agent Martinez smiled for the first time since he had hit her, though the expression looked painful on her injured face. First, we need to make sure Victor doesn't leave this building. Second, we need to call my backup team without alerting him. And third, we need to figure out how to explain this mess to our supervisors. And how exactly do we do all that? Very carefully, Agent Martinez said, and with a lot of luck. Just then, David's radio crackled again. Unit 247, this is Captain Rodriguez. I'm 5 minutes from your location. What's the situation? David's stomach dropped. Captain Rodriguez was his supervisor, and he was on his way to the scene. There would be no hiding this situation much longer. That's my boss, David explained to Agent Martinez. Then we better work fast, she replied, wiping more blood from her face. Because once he gets here, everything changes. David could hear Victor moving around more urgently in the apartment. Time was running out in every possible way. In less than 5 minutes, his captain would arrive and demand a full explanation. Victor would probably try to leave soon. And Agent Martinez needed medical attention whether she wanted it or not. What's the plan? David asked, though he wasn't sure he was ready for the answer. Agent Martinez straightened up, and despite her injuries, David could see the determination in her eyes. This was clearly someone who didn't give up easily. even when everything was falling apart. "We're going to finish what I started," she said simply. "But we're going to do it together." Captain Rodriguez's patrol car pulled into the apartment complex with its lights flashing but no siren. David watched from the third-floor window as his supervisor stepped out of the vehicle and looked up at the building. His stomach felt like it was full of rocks. "He's here," David said to Agent Martinez, who was still trying to stop the bleeding from her nose with a tissue she had found in her pocket. "Okay, listen carefully," Agent Martinez said quickly. "We tell him exactly what happened, but we emphasize that Victor is still in the apartment and we have a chance to catch him. We focus on the opportunity, not the mistake." David nodded, though he wasn't sure how they were going to spin this situation into anything positive. He had hit a federal agent with a baton. That wasn't the kind of thing that just got swept under the rug. Heavy footsteps echoed in the stairwell as Captain Rodriguez made his way up to the third floor. David had worked under Rodriguez for 8 years, and he knew the man well enough to predict his reaction. It wasn't going to be pretty. Captain Rodriguez appeared at the top of the stairs, slightly out of breath from the climb. He was a big man in his 50s with gray hair and the kind of presence that commanded respect. When he saw Agent Martinez's bloody face and David standing next to her looking guilty, his expression immediately darkened. "What in the hell happened here?" Rodriguez demanded, his voice echoing through the hallway. "Captain, this is FBI Agent Martinez," David began, but Rodriguez cut him off. "I can see the badge, Rivera. What I want to know is why she looks like she went 10 rounds with a heavyweight boxer." Agent Martinez stepped forward before David could answer. "Captain Rodriguez, there was a misunderstanding. Officer Rivera was responding to a break-in call and found me trying to enter an apartment. I was undercover and couldn't identify myself immediately. When I reached for my credentials, he acted according to his training to neutralize a potential threat." Rodriguez looked between them, his jaw clenched tight. David could practically see the wheels turning in his supervisor's head as he tried to process the situation. "You hit a federal agent," Rodriguez said to David, his voice low and dangerous. "Yes, sir," David replied. "But Captain, there's more to this situation. Agent Martinez was conducting an investigation of a weapons dealer in apartment 3B. He's still in there, and we believe he's preparing to flee." Rodriguez looked at the apartment door, then back at Agent Martinez's injured face. "How bad are you hurt?" "I'll live," Agent Martinez said. "But if we don't act soon, Victor Chen is going to disappear along with evidence of a major weapons trafficking operation." Captain Rodriguez pulled out his radio. "I need to call this in to headquarters and get you medical attention." "Captain, wait," Agent Martinez said urgently. "If you call this in right now, Chen will hear it on his scanner and bolt. My team is already in position around the building, but we need to coordinate the arrest carefully." Rodriguez paused with his radio in his hand. David could see the conflict on his face. Protocol demanded that he report the incident immediately, but Agent Martinez was right about the tactical situation. "How long have you been tracking this Chen character?" Rodriguez asked. 8 months, Agent Martinez replied. "He's been selling military-grade weapons to gang members across the city. Tonight we finally had enough evidence to make the arrest. Until..." She gestured at her face. David felt the guilt wash over him again. 8 months of work, potentially ruined because he had reacted too quickly. Captain Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment, considering his options. Finally, he made a decision. "Agent Martinez, I'm going to give you 15 minutes to coordinate with your team and make this arrest. But the moment Chen is in custody, I'm calling headquarters and reporting this incident. Understood?" "Understood," Agent Martinez said. "Rivera, you're staying right here with me," Rodriguez continued. "You don't move, you don't speak, and you definitely don't touch anyone else until Internal Affairs gets here." David's heart sank. Internal Affairs meant a formal investigation, which meant his career was probably over. 15 years on the force, and it was all going to end because of one terrible misunderstanding. Agent Martinez pulled out her cell phone and moved a few steps away to make a call. David could hear her speaking quietly to someone, probably her backup team. She was giving coordinates and discussing tactical positions. "Rivera," Captain Rodriguez said quietly. "What the hell were you thinking?" I was thinking she was a burglar who was reaching for a weapon, David replied. Captain, in this neighborhood at this time of night, what would you have done? Rodriguez didn't answer immediately. David could tell his supervisor was struggling with the same question. Any cop who had worked this beat would have made the same assumptions. That's not the point, Rodriguez finally said. The point is that you used force against a federal agent, and now I have to figure out how to explain this to the chief. Agent Martinez finished her phone call and returned to where they were standing. My team is in position. We're going to move in 3 minutes. Captain Rodriguez, I need Officer Rivera's help. Absolutely not, Rodriguez said immediately. Rivera is suspended pending investigation. He's not participating in any operation. Captain, with respect, Officer Rivera knows this building and this neighborhood better than anyone on my team. He's been patrolling this area for 15 years. We need his local knowledge to make sure Chen doesn't escape. David looked at his supervisor, hoping against hope that Rodriguez would agree. The idea of helping to catch Chen felt like his only chance to salvage something positive from this disaster. It's not happening, Rodriguez said firmly. Rivera is in enough trouble already. Just then they heard the sound of a door opening down the hallway. All three of them turned to see a man in dark clothing emerging from apartment 3B, carrying 2 large duffel bags. Victor Chen was making his move. That's him, Agent Martinez whispered. Victor looked up and saw the 3 of them standing in the hallway. For a split second, everyone froze. Then Victor dropped the bags and ran toward the emergency exit at the far end of the hallway. Stop! FBI! Agent Martinez shouted, taking off after him despite her injuries. David instinctively started to follow, but Captain Rodriguez grabbed his arm. I said you're not moving! Captain, he's getting away! David protested. They watched as Victor burst through the emergency exit door, setting off an alarm that echoed through the entire building. Agent Martinez was close behind him, but David could see she was struggling due to her injured face. Rodriguez's radio crackled to life. All units, we have a foot pursuit in progress at Maple Street Apartments. Suspect is a Hispanic male, approximately 30 years old, carrying multiple bags. David realized that other officers were now responding to the chase. His colleagues were going to be involved in catching a dangerous weapons dealer, and he was stuck in the hallway because of his own mistake. Captain, David said, my career is probably over anyway. Let me help catch this guy. At least then something good will come out of tonight. Rodriguez looked at him for a long moment, then at the emergency exit where Victor and Agent Martinez had disappeared. David could see the internal struggle on his supervisor's face. If I let you help and anything else goes wrong, we're both finished, Rodriguez said. And if Chen gets away because we have too few people on the ground, Agent Martinez's entire investigation was for nothing, David replied. The sound of sirens was getting closer as more units responded to the pursuit. Rodriguez made his decision. Stay close to me and follow my lead, he said. And Rivera? This conversation never happened. David and Captain Rodriguez rushed through the emergency exit door and found themselves on a metal fire escape overlooking the back alley. The alarm was still blaring, echoing off the surrounding buildings. Below them, they could see Agent Martinez pursuing Victor Chen through the maze of dumpsters and parked cars. There, David pointed to the far end of the alley. He's heading toward the industrial district. If he makes it there, we'll lose him in all those warehouses. Captain Rodriguez was already on his radio, coordinating with the other units that were responding. Unit 412. Suspect is heading east toward Industrial Boulevard. Set up a perimeter on the south side. David watched as Victor jumped over a chain-link fence with surprising agility for someone carrying heavy bags. Agent Martinez was about 30 yards behind him, but she was clearly struggling. The injury to her face was affecting her vision and balance. Captain, she's not going to catch him alone, David said. She can barely see straight. Rodriguez looked at the pursuit below, then at David. You know this area better than anyone. How would you track him? David studied the layout of the surrounding neighborhood. After 15 years patrolling these streets, he knew every shortcut, every dead end, and every place a criminal might try to hide. Victor doesn't know this area like we do, David said. He's running toward Industrial Boulevard because it looks like an escape route, but it's actually a trap. All those warehouses are locked up tight at night, and there's only 3 ways out of that district. What are you thinking? If we cut through Harrison Street and circle around, we can get ahead of him. Agent Martinez can keep pushing him from behind while we set up a roadblock. Rodriguez considered this for a moment. That's assuming he doesn't have a car waiting somewhere. David shook his head. Look at those bags he's carrying. They're too heavy for weapons. My guess is he packed money and important documents. He's planning to disappear completely, which means he doesn't want to involve anyone else who might know where he's going. They climbed down the fire escape and got into Rodriguez's patrol car. As they drove through the back streets, David directed his captain through a series of turns that would bring them to the far side of the industrial district. Rivera, Rodriguez said as they drove. After tonight, you're going to face a formal investigation. Internal affairs, possible criminal charges, definitely suspension. You understand that, right? Yes, sir, David replied. But right now, catching Victor Chen is more important than my career. Why? You don't even know Agent Martinez. A few hours ago, you'd never met her. David thought about that question as they turned onto Industrial Boulevard. Because she was doing her job and I messed it up. 8 months of work gone because I was too quick to use force. The least I can do is help her finish what she started. Rodriguez pulled the car into position behind a row of warehouses. They could see flashlight beams moving between the buildings about 2 blocks away. Agent Martinez was still in pursuit, but Victor had gained some distance. David's radio crackled with Agent Martinez's voice. This is Agent Martinez. Suspect has entered the warehouse district. I'm in pursuit on foot, but I need backup. My vision is compromised. David grabbed the radio before Rodriguez could stop him. Agent Martinez, this is Officer Rivera. Captain Rodriguez and I are positioned on the north side of Industrial Boulevard. Keep pushing Victor south and we'll cut off his escape route. Rivera, I thought you were suspended. Agent Martinez's voice came back, slightly out of breath. It's complicated, David replied. Just trust me. I know where he's going. Over the next 10 minutes, David guided Agent Martinez through the warehouse district using his knowledge of the area. He directed her away from dead ends and toward the paths that would force Victor to keep moving in their direction. He's going to try for the old Riverside packaging building, David told Rodriguez. It's been abandoned for 2 years, but it has loading docks that connect to the river. If he has a boat waiting there, he could disappear completely. How do you know all this? Because I've chased 3 other suspects to that same building in the past year. It's the only place in this district where someone can actually escape. They drove toward the Riverside building, arriving just as Victor emerged from between 2 warehouses. He was still carrying the heavy bags, and David could see he was exhausted from running. Agent Martinez appeared behind him, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Victor saw the patrol car and immediately changed direction, running toward a gap between 2 buildings. But David had anticipated this move. He's going for the river access behind Building 7, David said into his radio. Agent Martinez, if you cut through the loading area of Building 6, you can intercept him. Copy that, Agent Martinez replied. David and Rodriguez got out of their car and began moving on foot to close off Victor's other escape routes. David felt a strange sense of teamwork with Agent Martinez, even though they had only met under the worst possible circumstances. As they moved through the industrial complex, David realized that Agent Martinez was using his local knowledge while he was benefiting from her federal training. She moved with the confidence of someone who had tracked dangerous suspects before, while he provided the geographical awareness that only came from years of working these streets. There, Rodriguez pointed toward Building 7. I see him. Victor had reached the loading dock area behind the building, but he had stopped running. David could see him looking around frantically, as if he was searching for something that wasn't there. His escape plan fell through, David said. Whatever he was expecting to find here, it's not here. Agent Martinez's voice came over the radio. I have visual on the suspect. He's trapped between the loading dock and the river, no way out. David felt a surge of satisfaction. After everything that had gone wrong tonight, they were finally about to catch Victor Chen. But as they approached the loading dock, Victor made one last desperate move. He threw one of his heavy bags into the river, and David realized it probably contained evidence that would now be lost forever. Then Victor pulled something from his jacket that made everyone freeze. "Gun!" Agent Martinez shouted. Victor wasn't pointing the weapon at anyone specifically, but he was clearly panicked and unpredictable. David Rodriguez and Agent Martinez all took cover behind nearby concrete barriers. "Victor Chen, this is the FBI," Agent Martinez called out. "You're surrounded. Put down the weapon and surrender." "I'm not going to prison," Victor shouted back. "You have no idea who you're messing with." David looked at Rodriguez, then at the position where Agent Martinez was taking cover. Despite everything that had happened tonight, the three of them were now working together to resolve a dangerous situation. "Agent Martinez," David said quietly into his radio, "there's a service ladder on the backside of that building. If you can get Victor's attention focused on the front, Captain Rodriguez and I can circle around behind him." "Negative," Rodriguez said firmly. "Rivera, you're not engaging an armed suspect. Captain, we need to end this before he hurts someone or destroys more evidence." Agent Martinez's voice cut through their discussion. "Both of you listen to me. We do this by the book. Victor is cornered, he's scared, and he's got nothing left to lose. That makes him extremely dangerous." As if to prove her point, Victor fired a shot into the air, the sound echoing off the warehouse walls like thunder. The sound of Victor's gunshot echoed through the warehouse district like thunder. David's ears were ringing as he crouched behind the concrete barrier, his heart pounding. In all his years as a police officer, he had been in tense situations before, but this felt different. This time he wasn't just trying to catch a criminal, he was trying to fix the biggest mistake of his career. "Victor, listen to me," Agent Martinez called out, her voice steady despite the blood still visible on her face. "You're surrounded, but nobody wants anyone to get hurt here. Just put down the gun and we can talk." "Talk about what?" Victor shouted back. 20 years in federal prison? I don't think so." David could see Victor was panicking. The man was trapped between the river and 3 law enforcement officers with nowhere to run. That made him unpredictable and extremely dangerous. Captain Rodriguez was on his radio, calling for additional backup and medical support. "We need units at Riverside Packaging. Armed suspect, shots fired," he said quietly. David studied the layout, around the loading dock. Victor was positioned behind a concrete pillar, but David could see that his cover wasn't perfect. There was about 6 feet of open space between Victor and the edge of the dock where the river began. "Agent Martinez," David whispered into his radio, "can you keep him talking? I think I see a way to get behind him." "Negative, Rivera," Captain Rodriguez interrupted. "You're not engaging an armed suspect. That's final." But Agent Martinez had a different idea. "Actually, Captain, Officer Rivera might be right. Victor is focused on the front because that's where he thinks the threat is coming from. If we can distract him long enough—" "Absolutely not," Rodriguez said firmly. "We wait for backup." Victor's voice cut through their discussion. "I can hear. You talking, I know you're planning something." David realized that Victor was right. They were running out of time. The longer this standoff continued, the more desperate Victor would become. And desperate people with guns made dangerous decisions. "Victor," Agent Martinez called out, "I know you're scared, but think about this logically. You throw that gun in the river right now and we can work something out. Keep threatening us and this ends badly for everyone." "Work something out?" Victor laughed bitterly. "You people have been tracking me for months. You think I don't know what happens next?" David listened to Victor's voice and noticed something important. The man sounded exhausted, not just physically but emotionally. 8 months of looking over his shoulder, knowing that federal agents were closing in, had taken its toll. "Victor," David called out, making a decision that surprised even himself. "This is Officer Rivera. I'm the one who messed up tonight. I'm the reason Agent Martinez got hurt and your apartment got compromised." "Rivera, what are you doing?" Rodriguez hissed. But David continued. "The truth is, Victor, we all made mistakes tonight. I hit a federal agent by accident. You got caught because you stayed in the same place too long. But right now you have a chance to make the smart choice." Victor was quiet for a moment. David could tell he was listening. "What kind of smart choice?" Victor finally asked. The kind where you don't hurt anyone else and you don't get hurt either. You drop that gun, we arrest you properly, and everyone goes home alive tonight. Agent Martinez looked at David with something that might have been respect. Even Captain Rodriguez seemed impressed by David's approach. You think I'm stupid? Victor said. You think I don't know that federal weapons charges mean decades in prison? I think you're smart enough to know that killing a police officer or FBI agent means life in prison, David replied. And I think you're smart enough to know that your best chance of seeing your family again someday is to end this peacefully. The mention of family seemed to hit Victor hard. David could hear him breathing heavily from behind the concrete pillar. You don't know anything about my family, Victor said. But his voice had changed. The anger was still there, but David could hear uncertainty creeping in. Agent Martinez picked up on the shift too. Victor, Officer Rivera is right. Whatever sentence you're facing now, it gets much worse if you hurt someone tonight. But if you surrender peacefully, that shows cooperation. That matters in federal court. David could see Victor's shadow moving behind the pillar. The man was clearly struggling with his decision. Victor, David said gently, I know you're thinking about running or fighting your way out. But look around. You're at the edge of a river in the middle of winter. Even if you got past us, where would you go? For several long minutes, nobody spoke. David could hear sirens in the distance as additional backup arrived. Victor could hear them too. If I surrender, Victor finally said, what happens to my wife? She doesn't know anything about this business. She thinks I work in import-export. Agent Martinez and David exchanged glances. This was the opening they needed. Victor, if your wife isn't involved in the weapons trafficking, she has nothing to worry about, Agent Martinez said. We've been watching you for months. We know she works at the hospital and takes care of your kids. She's not a target of this investigation. David could see Victor's gun hand starting to lower. The fight was going out of him. I want to talk to a lawyer before I say anything, Victor said. That's your right, Agent Martinez replied. But first you need to put down the weapon. After what felt like an eternity, Victor stepped out from behind the concrete pillar with his hands raised. The gun was on the ground behind him. Smart choice, David said, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. Captain Rodriguez and Agent Martinez moved in to secure Victor while David covered them. As they handcuffed the suspect, David realized that they had actually done it. Despite everything that had gone wrong tonight, they had successfully arrested a dangerous weapons dealer. 3 months later, David sat in a conference room at FBI headquarters, still hardly believing he was there. The internal affairs investigation had been completed, and while he had received an official reprimand, he had kept his job. The successful arrest of Victor Chen had gone a long way toward balancing out his mistake. Agent Martinez entered the conference room, and David was struck by how different she looked. The bruises on her face had healed completely, and she was wearing a formal FBI suit instead of her undercover clothes. Officer Rivera, she said with a smile. Thank you for coming. Thank you for asking me to be here, David replied. Though, I have to admit I'm still not sure why you wanted me at your promotion ceremony. Agent Martinez sat down across from him. Because you taught me something important that night. Sometimes the best partnerships come from the most unexpected places. She slid a folder across the table to him. David, how would you feel about joining a joint federal-local task force? We're putting together a team to target weapons trafficking throughout the region. We could use someone with your street knowledge and instincts. David opened the folder and saw an official job offer. After 15 years as a regular patrol officer, he was being offered a chance to work major federal cases. Agent Martinez, I don't know what to say. Say yes, she replied. We make a good team. That night proved it. David thought about everything that had happened since that terrible moment in the apartment hallway. A mistake that could have ended. His career had somehow led to the best opportunity of his professional life. Yes, he said, extending his hand to shake hers. Partners? Partners, Agent Martinez agreed, shaking his hand firmly. As they walked out of the FBI building together, David reflected on how much his life had changed. Sometimes the worst nights can lead to the best outcomes, especially when people are willing to admit their mistakes and work together to make things right.